My name is Terry Boyce. I'm a member of Friends of Buddina, a recently formed group that came into existence really as a result of a number of people who live in Buddina becoming aware of applications to council in the Buddina Urban Village Zone. That's a zone that allows development to a much higher height than normal residential. And tonight we are lucky to have staff from the Sunshine Coast Town Planning Department here to inform you of the details of that. Tonight is to advise you of those details, the location, height limits, authorised developments under that zoning. There'll also be advice of an existing application at the corner of Iluka Avenue, Talinga Street and Pacific Boulevard. This evening is to impart information to you. The meeting, therefore, will be tightly controlled in that all activities are to be respectful of presenters and other attendees. There'd be absolutely no personal attacks or derogatory remarks, and if that does occur, which I don't expect it will, but if it does, we will actually have no option but to cancel the meeting, and that would be a shame because we have some really good presenters with accurate information and you're here to be informed. So the meeting will respect the rights of all parties, including those of any developers to purchase property in the village. They have every right to develop, provided they do so in accordance with the Sunshine Coast Planning Scheme and all state and federal laws that are applicable. Friends of Buddina want to have everyone informed of the actual situation that applies to the Buddina area and to work with authorities to get the best outcomes for all parties concerned. That's the end of my introduction. I now call on the staff members of the Sunshine Coast Town Planning Department. I will leave it to them to introduce themselves. Would you give them a warm welcome, please?
Hello everybody, can you hear me all right? Yeah? Thank you. Thank you all for coming tonight. My name is Renee Saunders, I'm a senior planner of the Sunshine Coast Council. With me I have Danny Bundle, the team leader of planning assessment, and Stephen Whitby, who is the coordinator of planning assessment. We also have the divisional councillor John Connolly in attendance. We understand this meeting has been organised to provide forum for residents to seek information and express your views on development of the Buddina Urban Village area in general and with respect to the current application that we're assessing. We've been asked to attend in our capacity as the regulatory authority to outline the development assessment system in Queensland and the Sunshine Coast Council, outline the development proposal, and provide some general advice on the differences between code accessible development and impact accessible development in the state. Our role in this application is as the assessment managers. So we will be undertaking an assessment of the current proposal in light of the planning scheme provisions that apply to the site. Important to note, I suppose, that we haven't been involved in the drafting of the planning scheme instruments that apply to the site. So what we're doing is assessing the proposal against the planning scheme, which includes, considering the views of the community. So to start, just excuse me while I figure out how to work everything here. You will all be aware of the current application before Council. It's for 73 multiple dwelling units. It's on a development site comprised of 6 individual allotments, and the site is bound by Pacific Boulevard, Talinga Street and Iluka Avenue. The development proposal was originally lodged over 8 lots, and it's now been amended to apply to 6 lots only. The site is zoned high-density residential. It has a 21-metre height limit under the planning scheme, as does all the land here on the map that is in the maroon colour, the dark red colour there. The site is covered by the Kawana Waters Local Area Plan. That applies to the whole of the local area, including Buddina, Petitions, Ocarina, Warana, quite a few suburbs. So overall, because that plan applies to quite a wide geographic area, it identifies a number of special precincts that have different provisions that apply to them. So this site, as we all know, and as Terry mentioned, it's located within the Buddina Urban Village precinct. That precinct is as highlighted in these various colours on the map in front of you. There are a couple of sub-precincts, and the particular site in the light blue is mapped within the Urban Village Residential Precinct. The objectives for that specific precinct under the local plan are to provide for higher density residential accommodation in the form of permanent and visitor accommodation on sites that are large and integrated. The local plan provisions seek for the coordinated amalgamation of lots. We'll touch a little bit shortly on the development node issue, which is something that's come out quite strongly in the residents' concerns we've received so far. Development must ensure that amalgamated lots, so the larger lots we are creating, don't isolate excluded lots. And we must be maximising the site area and minimising the site cover to make sure we still maintain residential amenities surrounding properties. That's a key part of this assessment, because we acknowledge that what is happening here is we have a proposal for a development type that's vastly different to what is on the ground in this area at the moment. So it's a key concern of ours to make sure any development in the area is still respectful of the existing residential environment. Quite an important point is also to know that the planning scheme provisions that apply to our site are not new. They've actually been around since 2004 in their earlier iteration, I suppose, under the Caloundra City Plan. So they were inserted into that document at the request, I believe, of the Divisional Council at the time. And the nature, I suppose, of the Queensland planning system is that the community consultation occurs at that process. We'll get to code and impact accessible development shortly, but generally the premise is that those higher level decisions and the views of the community are undertaken earlier in the overall planning scheme process, not so much on an individual application by application basis. I understand you may have some questions about that, and we will expand upon that a little bit shortly. So the development proposal that I know a lot of you have had a look at and sent us in your concerns. It's for 73 multiple dwelling units. They're 2-bedroom to 4-bedroom. There is a corner store proposed. It's got a gross floor area of 80 square metres. The proposal provides 190 car parking spaces, which is well in excess. It's actually double that's required under the planning scheme. The building is 21 metres high. It does step down the site slopes, as you all know, from Pacific Boulevard down to Iluka Avenue, so the building form takes account of that. There's 2 vehicle entries. You can see on this plan, one centrally from Iluka Avenue and the other off Talinga Street. Council, as I mentioned, is the assessment manager for this proposal. That was the ground floor plan, obviously. This is the first floor plan. Really just to provide a little bit more context and illustrate how that upper level works, because that's sort of the Pacific Boulevard frontage that has these units directly addressing it. So this is one image of what the current proposal looks like. We're currently assessing the application against the planning scheme as it applies to the site. There are quite a number of development codes that we need to assess this against. And they include, we've sort of talked about these, the high density residential zone code that does permit this type of development in the area, the Kawana Waters Local Area Plan, the multi-unit residential uses code, coastal protection overlay code, the landscape code. There's quite a list. The assessment is also giving regard to the concerns that have been raised by residents. So a lot of you, I think, have some strengths in the planning area because the concerns we've raised are actually probably the best I've ever read for any applications like this. So you've raised a number of issues about the suitability of the development behind the site cover, proximity to the school, traffic impacts, coastal erosion, proximity to the what's now known as quite a well-used term, nesting beach, Buddina Beach, safety, ongoing amenity impacts. We are assessing, and we have requested information on these matters as part of our information request. One of the, I'll also mention we've asked the developer also to respond to raise the fact that this development is what's called code accessible. And we understand that there is angst, I suppose, out there about why there's not a right under the legislation to public notification of this proposal and proposals of this nature. Code accessible development and impact accessible development, they come out of the Queensland planning system. So council does not have a discretionary role in determining on an application by application basis whether something is code accessible or impact accessible. Different states do this differently. In New South Wales, for example, there's a much greater role of public notification and public involvement in the DA stage. In Queensland, that system is quite different. And as I mentioned, the consultation gets undertaken much earlier in the process before the planning scheme amendments or the planning schemes themselves actually come into effect. So suppose I've sort of summarised this already. The standard process for a code accessible DA is on the top line. The main difference is there's not a public notification step prescribed under the Planning Act for code accessible applications. Notwithstanding that, though, as I said, we've received residents' concerns on this proposal, and in the same way that we do for any concerns we get for any code accessible applications, we give regard to those. This is a bit legalese, so I apologise if it's not the most interesting part of the presentation, but for code accessible applications, what code means is you can only assess those applications against the codes that the planning scheme tells you apply to that application. Code accessible development must be approved if it complies with all of the assessment benchmarks, or it can be conditioned to reasonably comply with those assessment benchmarks. So assessment benchmarks are our development codes. So they are all the documents that you've all had a look at and raised your concerns against, and the listed documents I mentioned before, the local area plan, the zone code, the multi-unit residential uses code, all those sorts of things. There's a whole suite of codes that DAs in general need to comply with. They are set out in Part 5 of the planning scheme, which it's called the Tables of Assessment. If you have a look at that, what it will do is tell you for every zone across the Shire, for every land use we have listed in the planning scheme, what type of assessment that particular land use is subject to, whether it's code or impact, and which codes apply to that assessment if it's code accessible. The key difference, well, I guess there's two key differences between code and impact assessment. For an impact accessible application, yes, you get public notification, but you also assess the proposal against the entirety of the planning scheme. So that includes the strategic framework, that includes any code, that includes the outcomes of public submissions, that includes any matter that may be relevant to that application. For a code accessible DA, your assessment is bounded by the codes that the tables of assessment tell you you can assess it against. So they're the ones in blue here. You can only assess that application, in this case the current application, against Part 6, 7, 8, 9 and 10 of the planning scheme. Again, a little bit of detail, I suppose, but it's quite relevant. Under the Act, a code accessible application is not required to meet the acceptable outcomes only. Complying with the acceptable outcome is only one way of achieving compliance with the overall performance outcomes in the particular code. Where a proposal does not meet the acceptable outcomes, we assess it against the performance outcomes. And that assessment itself can actually be elevated also up to the overall outcomes of those codes if required. So the key takeaway is that satisfying an acceptable outcome is one way that a development can meet a particular control, but it's not the only way. So there is this inherent sort of flexibility and performance-based planning really built into the Queensland planning system. This is not Sunshine Coast Council specific. Notwithstanding the lack of a formal legal public notification right. Anyone can make a comment on the development application. We'll consider all comments we receive through the application process. You can email them to us, you can mail us, you can pick up the phone and talk to myself or any member of the team. There's more information on our website about how you can do that, but most of you guys are pretty good at that. We have a new system now called Development Eye. I think Stephen was going to talk about this, but I might just crack on and you can interject if we need to. So this is a pretty cutting edge program, I suppose, that council's pioneered. I'm pretty sure we're the only local government in the state, in the country, who have this system. So if you haven't had a look, please have a look, because it's actually really cool. What you can do, you can access this 24/7. It's really easy to search. You can go in here and put in an address or put in an application number and pretty much search through and find all the application documents to do with a particular application or to do with an application in your local area or anywhere really. You can search any site in the Shire. It's kind of cool because it pops up the results on a little map. And you can then click into surrounding development applications and have a look at what's happening in your local area. So the uptake of this is pretty good. There's heaps of people using it, and a lot of you are using it. This is really what complements the co-accessible application pathway, I suppose. Even though there's not a formal notification right, all this information is out there regardless, and it's very, very easy for you to access it. A really cool thing you can do with this is to set up an alert. You have to register an account, which is easy. You go in and you just set up alerts for your local area, and you'll get an email then. I think you can choose, you can get daily emails or weekly emails. When something pings up in your search area, you'll be notified. So you can get straight on there, you can have a look at what's proposed, and there's links straight through to make your concerns known to us, and you can see all the application documents in there. I got a little bit ahead of myself and sort of ran into this slide early. We have some brochures of some of the key information about this system, and we'll leave them with Terry for the end of the presentation. We don't have enough for everybody, but we're hoping we've got enough for some of your key community members to maybe go through and provide between yourselves. There are also some really easy to follow sort of YouTube videos and that sort of thing on our website that show you how to set up those alerts. So we would encourage you to do that. I guess that's sort of the end of our formal presentation. We understand there's probably some questions, so we will be around to answer some of those. And hand back to Terry to...
Okay, so we'll have a short information session. Anyone got a question? We do have another microphone. Sorry, only with a microphone. We'll get a microphone to you shortly. While that's happening, Leslie has a question. I'll go to her first.
Thank you very much, Renee. I was wondering if you could take us back to the slide that shows the building heights in the Buddina urban village. The one that showed the 21 metres. About the third slide. Up there. That slide shows all of those buildings or potential buildings could be 21 metres high. The map on Council's website shows a different picture, that a couple of those areas are in fact 12 metres. So I'm wondering, has there been a recent update to some lots to 21 metres and the website not updated, or?
This map is actually not the heights map. This is the zoning map. It relates only to the high density residential zone and the tourist accommodation zone. The high density res is the dark red, and the stuff in the middle is the tourist accommodation zone. Surrounding that, the light pink is a low density residential zone. The height limits, I'm afraid I don't have the image. There are multiple height limits that apply to the area, and that's not in either, I'm sorry. That's the local plan precinct. There has not been a change to the height limits as they currently are in the planning scheme.
My apologies, I read that as height limits when you said density limits, because I know there are some 12 metre high limits there, and I didn't realise 12 metres would be high density rather than medium density.
Yes, we have a question down there. Could you just say your first name?
Can you hear me? I'm a resident of Corinne Drive. We're all sitting here listening to codes and what's going on. Here is, I think, to try and understand how much further this will go in the way of development in our area, which is protracted. So most of us are here are pretty aware of what's going on, but we're seeing traffic build up in our area over a period of time, which is really, if you live in Corinne Drive now, it's stacked up to the little bit past the middle of Corinne Drive in the morning. Now, residential, you're putting a proposal in, what, for 190 car spaces in this new development? What's that going to impact on getting out of Point Cartwright, getting the back streets, which is a quick exit onto Nicolan Way, which is absolutely stacked up at 9 o'clock in the morning? We realise we live in a really nice area here, and we do realise we have satellite suburbs, Petitions and so on, that people come and walk their dogs every afternoon, and we do have a traffic impact on that. Do we have to have more density on this development here that's going to encroach on the beachfront, going to encroach on us that have come here to live in this environment, where, what is the height limit of this again? How many stories does that make it on this development? You haven't given us that answer because you've just
21 metres, and that's 7 stories.
Seven stories. Seven stories, which is what you're looking at, I think, is about 2 stories below the street level of what you're going, and then you've got to 5 stories, 6 stories above that when you get to beachfront, just up here.
Yes, that's what we're talking about. Exactly.
Yeah, well, we want to, what's the resolution? Where are we coming to with all this?
So the purpose...
Are we going to talk about codes or not, or are we going to get on with this?
Sorry. The purpose of the night is to inform you of what the actual situation is right now, and has been so since 2004. It only happens to be now that commercially it's viable for the owners of those properties to put in applications for higher buildings. So we can like it or dislike it. The first thing is to be informed, to know what the rules are, and then see what can be done to minimise the impact or to make change. I'm sure the frustration you feel is felt by just about everyone here, but we have to be smart about this as well. And for the town planning staff, any questions about the zoning or queries in relation to that? Yes, there's another. Okay.
Hi, it's Tracy Rubin McDonald. I was involved with the State of Buddina in the infill early on, and this Buddina Urban Village was actually approved prior to all that. And whilst I stand there and talk about the consultation process, and there was a consultation process about the Buddina Urban Village. So we're now sitting here facing decisions that were made 15 years ago and a planning scheme based on 15 years ago. And what I'm hearing is that that's written in stone, and I was aware of that. But when we did the study of Buddina, we did the Buddina character study. And the whole point of that character study was to give an overview of the ambience and the lifestyle criteria to go against these development plans. And at that time, it was supposed to be an overlaying document. It was not a legal document, but it was an overlying document that was supposed to give some voice to the community about the amenity and the character of this area. Where does that come into this assessment now?
So, with the Sunshine Coast Planning Scheme, that also went through a public notification process back in 2013. There were a lot of community meetings, there were road shows in all the shopping centres and the like, plus a large mail out to all of the residents. In terms of the old planning scheme and those higher order, I suppose, local character, planning provisions and the like, a lot of those were translated into the local plan code, which Renee mentioned that this application is being assessed against. So there are a lot of local provisions around character, amenity, that will also be considered in our assessment of the application. I haven't reviewed the document that you referred to, but I do know that a lot of the earlier material that fed into those earlier planning schemes were also considered in the Sunshine Coast planning scheme review at the time.
Another question?
Chairman, please.
Get a microphone, please.
Hello, my name's Greg. From what I've heard here tonight, basically it is information on, you're telling us it is what it is, and that's it. With all the different codes and the accessible this and the accessible that, if you don't meet this one, but you meet that one, we're still going to do it. There's been no consultation. I've been here 20 years. I haven't seen another planning meeting. Maybe I was under a rock somewhere. But what we've got to ask ourselves is, and if you can tell me, I'd really like to know, anybody up there, how does this enhance the lifestyle of the people, the ratepayers, the voters who already live here? Can anybody tell me how this enhances our lifestyle by sticking these up on the front of the beach at 21 metres and telling me it's going to stretch all the way down to Arena? The Sunshine Coast had a name, I came here 20 years ago, for the lifestyle, to get out of Sydney and not to be in the Gold Coast. Now we can take Paradise and put up a parking lot, or as a residents here, we can get together and make a bit of noise about it. Now if you don't want to, that's fine. Do nothing, go nowhere. The hedge is in. Once the hedge has got in, now we're dealing with this. Is it the same developer that is developing both sides? Is it the same developer that's going down there? Are we going to get bombarded by developers Australia-wide saying, well, it's open up now, fellas. Geez, on. Go for your life. It's 21 metres. It has been since 2004, apparently. If you try and build a shed next to your back fence, but I tell you what, we're going to hang up a 21 metre, 7-storey building, and we're going to put another one beside it and another one beside that. And then we're going to see shops and everything else in them. And as we said here before, the infrastructure doesn't handle it now, but it's not just all about cars. On that building alone, you see you had 146 people, 2 people a unit. Some of them are 3 and 4 bedroom. If an investor buys it, not an owner, he's got to put 6 people in there because he's going to want $900 a week to pay it back. So they're all going to have a car. And we all know that it's happening now. Share houses all over the place. So your streets are packed with cars. You'll never get in and out. But it's not the cars and the traffic that I'm most worried about, albeit I live on the same street as Phil, and it's pretty bad now. It's the impact upon the lifestyle of the people. These are the people that vote, and you've got that vote. So next time you get a chance to exercise it a bit long and hard, because I find this pretty abhorrent in this area. You haven't got all the turtles, the crowd on the beach, rubbish and all the rest of it. You know some information leading, you've told us information, but basically from the information you told me when I first got here, this is it. That's it.
Well, I'd suggest you reserve your opinion until the end of the meeting. We're hearing information from Council initially, and then Friends of Buddina have a presentation to say what we see may or may not be able to be done. But look, we're really after any questions for the town planning staff, because they're about to leave. Anyone who's got questions for the town planning staff, this is the man over here. Yes?
Just a simple one. What's your time frame for making a decision with all your code assessments? How long is this going to... You must have a time frame. I'm sure the developer is asking for one.
The state of the application at the moment is that we've issued an information request. We issued that on the 18th of January. When the applicant has 3 months to respond to that, we then enter what's called the decision period, and we have 25 days to make that decision, assuming that the response to the information request covers the matters that we've raised. It may not. It's a very short time frame for a code accessible application.
Yes, next question.
Thanks, Mr. Chairman. My name is Ian. I'm a resident of Buddina. While we have the council staff here, I'll grab the opportunity to get as much information as we can. The development proposal is under the high density zoning of the Buddina village, and that allows for a corner store. What compliance ability has the council got after that the units have been sold to retain that as a corner store and not some other business?
Under the planning scheme, so that corner store is restricted in size as well as the use. That use has to be a commercial shop use. That's what they've applied for. There's no ability to change that into some other form of another type of use. I don't know what, maybe if you could just answer in terms of, for me to answer the question, what concerns do you have in terms of what that use might change into? Yeah, so bars and the like are definitely are uses that are not...
Yes, sorry, that probably... Sorry, that does the... Sorry, Mr. Chairman, that does need explaining.
Use your voice if you can.
Yeah, thanks. If it was another business who had the impact assessed now, it can go through under current zoning filters, put into the application as a form store. What rights or start doing another business once the whole development sold? That's fine.
So
it can get through now.
Yeah, under the state legislation, council, we have a regulatory compliance team who respond to any complaints, but we also do audits of development. So if the owner of that store, if it's retained by the developer or not sold, if they wish to use it for another type of use, then it will go through, depending on what it is they're proposing, it will go through another assessment against the planning scheme. They'll have to lodge an application. If they're proposing something that is impact accessible, then the whole community will know about that, because there will be signs up on the property, as well as neighbours and ads in the local paper. So, as Renee mentioned before, there's a different process for those types of uses where they're inconsistent with the planning scheme. They'll go through a higher level of assessment.
Thank you. So in summary, another application would have to be made if the nature of the use changes.
One more question.
Yes?
Who the developer is? Could you against the
On council's website is the name of the developer. I think it's a company. Well, I don't know, but you can find out by. Has anyone got the name of the company?
The name is Pacific Diamond 88. Proprietary Limited.
So sorry, on that note of the developer,
No, come on, one at a time.
John Connolly, do you have a vested interest in this development?
Look.
That's not inappropriate.
That's not.
So how is that inappropriate? Do you have a vested interest in this development?
Of course not. Is the quick answer.
Sorry?
Of course not. Look, we have council staff who are about to
John, do
leave.
you have a vested interest
He has
in
already
this
answered.
development?
Excuse me, sir. We have a lot to get through. There's a lot of
So answer
information.
my question honestly. You don't.
Sir.
So John, when I ask this question, no,
Sir,
you listen
stop.
to me.
We will
No, I won't
close this
stop.
meeting
You'll listen
if
to
you
me.
do not stop.
When I ask this, John,
Okay.
will you
We
tell
cannot
me, when you
continue
had
this
cabs,
meeting
when you
whilst
had
this is
cabs,
happening.
and you made a false statement
Can
that
you
owned more
please
than one
remove
cab
yourself
license,
from the meeting?
and you applied for finance for 2 cab licenses when you're
Sir,
buying
this
them.
is about an information
happened?
session. This is an information session. So, we've got the staff here. If there's any further interruption, you'll be asked to leave.
I'll leave happily, mate. I'll
Okay.
leave happily.
Could you leave now then?
Yes, I will. Before
Thank
I
you.
leave, before I do leave, can you tell me what you said before, that we should look at this sensibly, what you meant by that? So we're obviously looking at this stupidly.
Sir?
You want me to
No more.
leave?
No more.
You want me to leave because you don't like the questions I'm asking? You don't like them, John?
No. Please.
I'll leave, mate.
Thank you. Look. The other microphone, the battery's not on. Sorry.
I feel like I have the most important question. Can we stop this? Can we stop this?
Please, if you can be patient, we have a lot to get through.
Can we stop this?
Sir, you'll get the answers to that by the end of the meeting. Okay. There don't appear to be any other questions on the council. Yes. There's one question. Yeah.
With regard to your jobs.
With regard to your jobs.
Okay, why a corner store?
Why a corner store? Because it's part of the zoning.
A shopping centre.
It's allowed in the zoning.
But why?
That's why.
That was
That's the way it is. We're not here to ask the whys, because it's written in stone by state government and council. Yes, sir.
Where is this development going to be drained?
The question is, where is this development going to be
drained? All the drainage, because I live on a canal. Since we've had the shopping centre, these new units, I live on a drain now, not a canal, because it's that much mud in that.
So this man lives on a canal, and since all of the development, he lives on a drain. That's his statement. I'll ask, where is it going to be drained?
All developments have to deal with on-site treatment and storage of stormwater. So they will be draining into the
canal.
Into the
That's where
council.
it's going, into a canal.
They'll be draining into the local stormwater network. They will.
Into the canal. And
Yes.
that's where we're getting all this mud and crap coming in.
Okay,
And we can't
please,
even
due respect to the presenter.
All stormwater has to be treated before it leaves the site. So on site they have a detention system that will clean and treat all the stormwater. It's a requirement on all new developments and subdivisions, and then it is discharged into the local stormwater system and into the canal, all the waterways, and ultimately into the
Why is our
Water
canal
River.
turned black every time they
Excuse me,
pump it
sir.
out?
You've made your point. Yes? So, with the actual look of the building,
Within the code, what, how much are you able to say to them that that doesn't comply or it isn't within harmony of
okay,
the-
so how much
To me, at
can
the
you
moment, it looks
say
like...
that's not in harmony or doesn't comply?
We raised this issue in the information request, and the local area plan has provisions that talk about coastal character and subtropical design for climate, interesting materials that are consistent with the type of development that's in the local area. We have specialist architectural and urban design staff that are assessing this proposal and have fed into the information request items that we've issued so far. One of the items we've requested is a 3D model of this building so we can really understand what it's going to look like. It's very difficult from the plans that we have so far that you would have seen online. It's hard to tell from the two-dimensional plans what the ultimate look and feel is going to be. So we do expect there'll be changes made as a result of the information request process, and those changes will be reflected in the model that we will assess. We haven't seen anything yet.
Time for one last question. I'm afraid we do have to move on to the rest of the meeting. There was a lady right in the back. Yes. Sorry, you'll have to come up here. Sorry.
Street. How did the developer manage to do that? And if you look at my home, as you walk here at school, it's absolute shit. Thank you, council. I had many conversations with Mark Cornell and you, and this is what Renee said to me. Can I please say?
Hang on a second. What is the question? Why was your house left alone while everything else has been allowed to develop around it?
Our property is zoned at the same height as the hedge, whereas Buddina Street is only 12 metres. We had no idea that was happening until we read it in the paper at December. It was approved in August. I rang up Mark Miller and said, what's going on? He said, I said, we've never been approached.
What is the question?
I got the developer that night rang me at 8 o'clock that night.
What is the question of the town plan?
All I'm saying is, be honest because you weren't to me.
I'm sorry, I don't know what the question was. So you own the house in the same...
Yeah, we own 4 Tumor Street. Are we going to end up some area? We've got 5 houses. You have a look at it. We're not spending money on it.
Well, that's not a question really the town plans to ask. It's a result of the zoning. I'm not minimising what has happened to you. It's something that needs to be dealt with. I'm sorry. We have to move on to the next section of the meeting. We will tell you that before the meeting's over if we get a chance to finish the meeting. Now, can we please be more disciplined? Thank you. Could you please thank the town planners who are come, Renee Saunders, Damien Lumley, and Stephen Whitney. We really appreciate their attendance. So please, a speaker, presenter, will be Rodney Zinn from the traffic section of Sunshine Coast Council. Can you please welcome Rodney and I can tell you that, listen, hang on. We want to get through this meeting. We want to get this information. If you start carrying on, this will be the end of the meeting. Now that would be attractive because we have a lot of stuff to tell you. Thank you. Please. We have another one working. Yes, sir.
Good evening, everyone. My name's Rod Zinn. I'm the Traffic and Transportation Manager at the Sunshine Coast, so I look after the operations of the transport road network. Probably don't really have a lot to present here tonight, just to let you know, I guess, that we've been... Sorry, is that better? We've been working in the Buddina area for a length of time. We've got some good traffic data in both Oceanic and the surrounding streets. We're looking, I guess, at improving the way parking operates around the school. That's been fairly successful from the feedback we've had. So, look, it's probably a bit like how long's a bit of string when you talk about traffic issues. So I would encourage you that if you've got any specific questions about the road network that probably won't have time to answer here, that you certainly get onto Council's customer service and you raise them with us, and we can get officers to go out and investigate and respond back to you. But I'm happy to take any questions.
So I've got a question. One of the things in looking at this application in Talinga Street, we've got the number of cars there, but in Council's assessment of parking and traffic, my understanding is that it only goes to provisions on site, that Council does not assess what impact that development will have on existing local roads. Is that correct?
Look, I work closely with the development team, but I'm certainly not a town planner or a development officer. I look after the road network, so we've got a hierarchy of the road network which sets the form and function of the road network. So you have things like local streets that are a certain reasonably narrow width to discourage speeding. You've got neighbourhood collector roads which are there to collect traffic and get it out of the area. Then you've got your arterial road network which is picking up that traffic and moving it out of the local area. The road hierarchy probably drives how we look at individual streets. There's probably not much more I can say as far as the development side of it, apart from we try and manage the implications of development. So we're pretty well, we accept the traffic from the development and we try and manage it as best we can within the existing road network.
Any questions of Rodney? Yes, now we've got two microphones. Here's one here. Sorry, sir. Excuse me, we have someone here. Look, security, if you do not stop, sir, you'll be asked to leave. Yes, like
I'd just like to know where a deliberation is done on developments and the effect that has on, say, Point Cartwright Drive. If you want to go to the right at the end of Point Cartwright Drive onto Nicholas Way, that is the only way out of this area. So if councils aren't looking at that, when they look at each development, where does that get assessed? Because even now, I've only been a resident here for maybe the last 8 years, and at certain times of the day now, it is, I can wait up to 4 changes in the right. That's good for development as it is now. So my worry is that if these developments go ahead, who is looking into that and saying, okay, we can't have any more development until, we have another access point out.
Sure. So within council, we've got a transport planning area that looks at growth on the road network, and they've got a model so they can plug in all of the expected growth, and that growth comes from the uses identified in the town plan and also the census that we do every 4 years. That all plugs in, and we also work with Transport Main Roads who have a model on their road network, and that's what informs investment in new roads. So, as you'd be aware, new roads don't always have the corridors for them. They're very expensive. If you're buying one side of a road to widen it, you've got to buy properties, and it's quite expensive. TMR, or Transport Main Roads, are looking at alternative corridors to Nicklin Way. So Kawana Way is one of the components to that broader arterial network. There's also the Iluka interchange, so actually linking Kawana Way up to the Sunshine Motorway and Brisbane Road, so that traffic doesn't have to come through the Pacific Boulevard intersection, which is one of the really bad ones, and leads to congestion. So Council's planning and the Transport Main Roads are planning and working on investment in trying to solve those problems.
Yes, there's a lady here. Can we get a mic? Oh, there's one over there. Yes.
Hi, my name's Helen. No one's spoken about where we're sitting, the school, and does traffic look at, this school, I've lived here 5 minutes. We literally have had a term of school with kids. We've moved from a very busy suburb in Sydney and picked Buddina because it was nice and quiet, they had amenities. Now the school's growing, more younger people are moving up here and you're putting in more units. But does your traffic authority look at, the kids that are riding their bikes everywhere, that are flying down that hill on their skateboards, on their scooters, the old people that are using the community centre? Like, I know traffic in terms of sitting in traffic is not great, but what about foot traffic and the danger that potentially that poses to this school, which is right out of this road?
Transport is a very important part of the overall treatment of road safety and traffic issues. So we do have a behaviour change team that works with the schools. So we've got a list of 10 schools that we're working with to, encourage active transport. So look at improving cycling safety, looking at providing walking links, and we also work with the Department of Education to encourage them to build car parks for their teachers, to get the teachers off the road network, which frees it up for parents as well. One of the big things we battle with around schools in particular is that the peak time, both morning and afternoons, is relatively short, and we can't provide everyone who goes to that school with a car park right out front of the school. So we work with the school to try and educate parents as to what alternatives there are, and that's where my travel behaviour change team comes in and works. We're also looking at improving the footpath networks and making cycling safer, because that really is, in all of this, as the Sunshine Coast develops, we get higher density, that's the way that we're going to have to try and address some of these issues. So I'm certainly happy to work with the school anytime on those safety issues.
Thank you. We only have time for one more question. We're hoping to finish this meeting at 8:30. It's already 8 p.m. There's a lot that we want to cover. Friends of Buddina have a lot of information they want to actually give you. So, yes, last question.
We live on Pacific Boulevard and will be...
Just hold the mic close to your mouth.
Okay. We live on Pacific Boulevard and we will be cut out of the 8 house. So we'll be living right next to the building that's going up. But my concern is the traffic that's coming past now, and if I want to get to golf, I'm often banked up
to get on Nickland Way at Centrelink. Now sometimes those lights only let 3 cars through. There's always that more traffic now because of what's been built, the car park at the new shopping centre. It's almost hopeless to get onto Nickland Way.
I'm not going to disagree with you, and I'm not here to defend Transport and Main Roads and I guess the investment that they've got to make in their road network. Yes, I do appreciate that we've got delays. I see the road network as a whole, and it's not something that just this area is experiencing. We've got areas in Bridgend, we've got areas in Brucheville, we've got areas in Caloundra. Probably specifics-wise, it sounds like that's more of an issue of timing of the signals. And to be honest, from a main roads perspective, I like to think that the department of through lanes, but their major concern is moving as much traffic along the Nickland Way corridor as possible, because you've got 56,000 vehicles a day up in those volumes. There's got to be, I guess, some delays in the local network, and I can't honestly say to you how we can affect that apart from these other corridors that are coming in to try and spread the load.
Sorry, that's all we have time for. Thank you very much, Rodney. And Rodney will hang around afterwards. Got any questions?
Just one thing before we start. The lady that came up before about the block that I isolate over here, I couldn't agree with you more. It happened before my time, and the council has done the right thing, the developer has. I met with the, I've got a soft voice for a big fat lady. Thank you very much. I've spoken to the developer who's renting that block on the corner, and I'm seeing what we can do about it down there, whether it's parking, reclaimed. But I couldn't agree with you more. I think it's not a nice thing that's happened in that block. So I just want to put that on the record. Seriously, as I said, I've made phone calls already, and I'll try and move forward. I'll do what I can. Just quickly, for people that I live in the area, and I do drive, Point Cartwright Drive half a dozen times a day. So I can understand something, and I kept a log for a week actually, and I was a bit surprised it wasn't too bad. But the problem I had was the lights up on Nickland Way. We went through a period of some bad changes, but we improved those changes and did improve the traffic flow going through. Just another point, and stating the obvious, and this lady over here simply reminded me, is that 8 years ago we had 2,000 kids leave school. Last year we had 3,000 in the Sunshine Coast. And what we have got is 1,200 people working down the hospital just down the road. So the area is growing. I remember this area here was LJ Hooker, and you couldn't give it away, and I wish I'd bought a bloody lot of it then, but I didn't. And it's, and as I said, I live in the area, I swim down here, I understand it. The journey for this started for many of you in the Pacific. The journey for me started 2 years ago on this development. Not long after, 2.5 years, not long after I got in. A group came to me and wanted to develop it. As you can see, it goes from about 200 metres to the south of the Surf Club and 150 to the north. A group approached me and wanted to develop a patch down the end. I looked at the planning scheme and thought 21 metres is fine. Not till I started to read the planning scheme, which many of you, none of you have read it, and I hadn't read it before I did it. I understood the strength of the nodes, how that put out nodes. So 6 months of arguing and fighting with them, we managed to squash that development down the end. And it was finished because they couldn't quite get the nodes. They got 4 in the front, 2 in the back, and so forth. 6 months later, probably 12 or 13, 14 months ago, a developer came in and wanted to buy the nodes and bought eight houses at this end. And I probably had half a dozen meetings with the residents down there, probably 45 phone calls to many people, and they bought 8. I got advice from our legal department in terms of what's code accessible, because you've got to play these things out to, if they go to court, what's going to happen. The council hasn't done very well lately in the last few court cases. I think we've lost the last 3 or 4. So through negotiations with the developer, we managed, if they developed, to bring it back from 6 to 8 to 6 on the corner. And I thought that was a win. Not what we really wanted, but I was very conscious after spending days and weeks with the planners and our legal department to understand what we could achieve, what we couldn't achieve. So I was comfortable up to 6. I didn't particularly like it, but it's been there since 2004. There are 3 or 4 buildings built around that time with 21 metres, obviously the surf club. So it's been done. I then took it upon myself to approach a lot of people along the front on each end about trying to get that off the planning scheme. Because I don't want it high-rise that much along here. I was then threatened that if I took it off the planning scheme, we'd sue, because we bought here knowing it was 21 metres, we don't value our property. I backed off very quickly and let it lie. So it's been a fairly long journey to where we're not tonight. Leslie and I have had a number of chats, not always agreeable, but understanding where this goes. I'm more than comfortable to call this up to council. But for people that don't understand, I think this will probably be approved. But again, they've set a lot of conditions there. And one of the conditions is that if you build in that area, the state government puts a lot of regulations down in terms of erosion rules and so go under the ground. Now, if it goes through as approved, I can then call it up to the other councils for approval. The other councils will then make a decision. First thing they'll ask, code accessible, if we go to court, what will happen? So you're looking at $200,000 at least if you go to court to play this out in the planning environment court. They will make their judgments based on that. And the advice that I got, it may be a stroke to stop it. I'm happy to fight it, I'm happy to take it to council, but I think it's important that people in this room have all the facts. As I said, I didn't know, I live in the area, I bought here, I didn't have a clue that this bobbed up. Some people down the front knew it was there, I didn't. And most of you probably didn't know either. I didn't know either. So, getting the best result out of this development, which I'm heading towards at the moment, I'm not resigned to the fact that we'll go ahead, by no means. But if we're going down that road, we want to negotiate the very best result for you people out of that development. Rodney and the work he does with the traffic, I've got to jump back on the traffic here, the number of cars, we insisted on, I think it's nearly double the number of cars that have to go there. And they agreed to that. And that came out in part of our 8 to 6 negotiations that we would support. So it's been a hell of a long journey. It really is for the shits. After 2 years of arguing, fighting with these people all the way through it, we are where we are. I'm happy to keep fighting with council, but as long as everyone here knows what could happen. Going to court is going to be difficult. Council officers, if I call it up, and if you put your hands up here and say, we want you to call it up, I'm happy to call it up. You have to know that the chances of winning that vote at council will be a struggle, simply because the question the councillors will ascertain, is it code accessible? If there's a small infraction there, they won't see that as enough, and they will get advice from the lawyers. If this does go to court, can we win? Which is the first question I ask whenever these things come through. You're in and out of their office. I said, this journey for me with council for the last 2.5 or so years has spent half my life in the planning department trying to come to grips with these things as they go through. And we've had a few wins. This is not a particularly good outcome in my opinion, but again, I've got to be realistic of what's in front of us. Is the hedge a good outcome? So, I can't comment before, but I think they could be a lot better. So, I'm not sure about that, but I take your point. I think the pitch students are a good outcome. So, but again, the traffic is something, as we grow here, is going to be a challenge. And the problem is everyone wants to really live here. Boulevard, we announced the other day that we'll go to council in Aria. new five-star hotel will be coming into the boulevard. And there's a number of other changes of car parks and hotels going in. And this is the last prime bit of beach, Heads Avenue, if you want to call it, on the Sunshine Coast. It's the best place to live along here. I don't like this. I will have another go at changing the planning scheme, but there's not going to be any more planning scheme amendments, and I've made some inquiries before I came tonight. Sometime well into the next council, if it comes out, which then gives us the ability to change. The challenge with that is that if people have bought here, knowing it's 21 metres, that will present some challenges to us. So I'm getting the tap on the shoulder right on, Leslie's turn. I hope that explains it to some extent of where we're at, and in my terms anyway. And I just want to finish where I started, about the lady at the back, that I think she was badly wronged in that outcome. And we'll just see. Look, you're going to ask me a question, I hope it's easy. We'll try hard to resolve that. I can't promise, but I'll try.
Thank you, John. Let's see if we can speak with her after. We have... I'm sorry, I'll get John to speak to you afterwards. We have only room to the next presenter. Yes.
John, I think a lot of people here realise that the rezoning of that really was done back in 2004 under the council of the day, and really no one knew about that until the Save Buddina campaign a couple of years later. And that council actually paid the price of trying to push all that stuff through. I'm hoping that you're aware of that situation, and the fact that the community spoke very loudly and clearly, and that you're actually doing everything you can, not necessarily to stop this current development, because I understand the whole issue with the accessible program and everything else, but what are you doing to stop the rest of that infill area being developed at the same level?
Thank you very much for that question. It's something I should have addressed when I was talking before. At the moment, we saw the area in the front that can be redeveloped. There's an area at the end of building area Crescent where there are 6 houses that are allowed development. They're the only houses on the planning scheme that are allowed to that 21 metres. There's no other high-rise anywhere except down in the old shipyards behind the pub, where there may be a high-rise, and I think that can be developed as well down there. But that's all it is. That's all I would allow in my terms, because that's, I think, appropriate for this area, for a million reasons, traffic coding and everything else. So, but I agree, I think a lot of thought has to go into this stuff. And one thing that we haven't done particularly well over the last 30 years is planning for the next 30 years. You know, we haven't, Nicola Wayne, there's a lot of work happening there tonight, every week, but we haven't planned terribly well for the future, as I mentioned. The crowd, the people that are going to be here, we've got a letter of the Labor Party that the state government and the other here the same, plus 500,000 people here on the Sunshine Coast within about 16 or 17 years. So preparing for that is a challenge, and that's, and again, but I think it is used something like suburbs and most of the next one.
One question, yes.
Hi. In 2018, there was a legal case held against the Brisbane City Council that was heard at Queensland Court of Appeal. The court ruled that the decision maker on the development application does not have discretion to substitute their own opinion of what constitutes public interest to justify relaxations of the scheme. Rather, they must apply the council's planning scheme on any development approval. That being the case, with reference to this development application, the development application is reviewing a significantly greater in site coverage and scale than what's allowed by the current town plan. What assurances can council give the community that the planning scheme is strictly limited to?
Everyone hear that question? The question to the site coverage and the extensive site coverage. The question that I've asked as well, precedent in that case in Brisbane, I'll take that on record and come back to you on that, but it's something that if I call this up, I don't think we're doing it on height, setback, parking, travel. But that's the one, burr in the saddle of the whole development. And I couldn't agree with you more. So that's something that will be addressed. And if this goes forward. I'm happy to take your notice before I go. Let's go further.
Question? Last one.
Thanks, John. We've been here since the early 70s, and it was nice to hear someone say that we live in a subtropical zone and on a beach. So we live on a beach and in a subtropical zone. In the early 70s, we had 2 cyclonic events. And at that time, the Beach Authority wanted to reclaim all the blocks on Pacific Boulevard. At that time, although the blocks were much cheaper, the council could not afford that, and nor could the Beach Protection Authority. Now, they were to go to Talinga Avenue, which is a part of the area we are talking about tonight. That means that erosion could occur and cause serious damage to the beach. I mean, even now, although we live on, I suppose, that part of Pacific Boulevard that was to be reclaimed, it's still a very, very fragile area. I can't imagine what it would be like if, as it was then, the whole of Pacific Boulevard had something like 4 metres of sand over it. There was not a leaf on a tree in the whole of Kauai Waters as it was then. So I don't know whether that has been considered, but it is certainly something that should be considered.
Thank you very much. I don't think we're doing climate change. I put on the record, and I think you probably stole a bit of Leslie's thunder here, because I think that's something she's passionate about. State government, as I understand it, and I ask questions about the environmental information building on those planes, at the far northern end of Kuwait and Surf Club, there are a lot of units built right up on the journeys, right close. They put these certain regulations in front in terms of walls under the ground and so forth that the APRA would have to adhere to. I take your point, is that good enough? I'm not sure. But better be assessed against the code. One thing before I go on that last question, I just recognise the council staff. It's not easy for them to come up and get a couple of a flogging, and particularly while they use the boss of transport, a huge effort to drive a fair way to get here tonight. So I appreciate the help that you give us. Thank you very much.
Thank you, John. Answers for you.
Thanks, Terry. Hi, everyone. As Terry said, my name is Leslie, and I'm a member of the community here in Buddina. I volunteer in local programs to support sea turtle conservation and dune restoration. I also volunteer with the Queensland Turtle Conservation Project at other locations, namely Monrepo and Heron Island. So I've been asked to talk to you tonight about turtles. So, Buddina Beach and the Sunshine Coast. Sunshine Coast hosts 5% of the nesting population of the endangered loggerhead species, and Buddina typically records the highest number of confirmed nests for the entire region. Buddina is identified as critical habitat for the species, and research informs us that artificial light is known to deter nesting females and discourage females from emerging from the ocean. So if we have lots of light, we have no turtles. It's simple. The maths are quite clear. The scientific research supports that, and I can quote any number of research papers on that. The same applies to hatchlings. So we might manage to get a female turtle up onto the beach to lay in an area that appears to have a dark space, because we know that turtles like to dig in the dark. And so when her hatchlings emerge, we have a different disorientation problem with artificial light. So the hatchlings will turn towards the artificial light source. If there's no moon, no stars, lots of clouds, you'll see those hatchlings either turn south or north, wherever those lights are, or if the light is direct, the hatchling will do a U-turn and go back towards the dune where the light from a high-rise is. We know this. We do fan data on Buddina Beach. We intentionally relocate nests away from erosion-prone areas and also from high-rise buildings where there are light problems, and I'm sure most of you know where those buildings are. So, my question is, why would we risk losing one of the most important nesting beaches on the Sunshine Coast, not just to the development that's currently being proposed, but to all developments that are likely to be proposed in that section that's been identified as 21 metres. So Council have already received some expert advice from the Department of Environment and Science and also from Dr. Kelly Pendoli from Pendoli Environmental. That advice was provided for another development at Urumba, and so that advice also applies to the Buddina Beach. For those of you who aren't familiar with the basics relating to turtle nesting, turtles prefer to dig dark beaches. If there are bright lights, they just go somewhere else. It may not be the best place for them to go, but they will choose to go somewhere else. Bright sky glow, without the actual light source being there, but however being visible, can be disruptive to the ocean finding behaviour of turtles as well. And those sources can affect turtles up to 18 kilometres away. So it's really important that we have lighting restrictions. I would have to say that we appreciate that Renee Saunders from Council, who spoke earlier this evening, in her information request to the developers, Council made a request for further information because there had previously been no reference to Buddina not only being a nesting beach, but the most significant nesting beach in the whole of the Sunshine Coast region. So Council have requested that the developers provide a significant species management plan and also a turtle impact assessment and lighting plan. So the requests that Council have made to the developers demonstrate that Council officers are aware of the requirements to protect this particular endangered species. Under both, there is an element, a code within the Sunshine Coast Planning Scheme. There's also state legislation, federal legislation and federal guidelines. So the applicant does have 3 months to respond. The applicant may ask for an extension or perhaps not respond with those particular requests. Then it's just over to Council and then they can choose how they process that. I would hope that Council will condition this development stringently in terms of lighting for turtles. Council runs its own turtle care program, so if we have too many lights, we have no turtles. If we have no turtles, we have no turtle care program. If we have no turtle care program, the beaches will not get cleaned up every day by the turtle care volunteers. It's quite simple mathematics. I would also hope that in conditioning this development, that Council consider the lighting restrictions that are placed on the developer also be placed on the title when the apartments are transferred by sale from the developer to the purchaser. There's no point having lighting restrictions in place while the development is in progress and then when the apartments are sold to not have those same lighting restrictions. So it's a bit of a wish, but we would like to see Council impose lighting restrictions that are not just restricted to the development period. Any questions? I'll talk turtle all day, so you don't really have to ask me questions. You can catch me.
I
think given we're running out of time, there are some very important other topics we need to mention to you. Perhaps I'll mention the next one, which is the applicability of state and federal legislation. Now, under code assessable, it was being assessed without regard to those, and you heard from Renee, it is all wrapped up in the code, but if it wasn't code assessable, for example, the fact that turtles are nesting in its important beach, there's state legislation and federal government legislation which also would apply to this development. We are not sure whether the provisions of that legislation are going to be conditioned into the development, but we will certainly be doing our best to see that happen. It's also in a beach erosion zone, which wasn't really mentioned at the time the application was made. But it was through our research we realised it is in a beach erosion zone. The state legislation says, and this is a quick summary, that the building footprint on any building being constructed in a beach erosion zone will not exceed the percentage in the code, which is 40%. This particular application in Talinga Street is 59%. We think that is a significant variation on the code, and we as Friends of Buddina, and we'll ask you to vote on a few proposals before we end, would want to see 40% coverage, the maximum coverage. So the height remains the same, 21 metres. It's proposed 6 blocks of 7 stories. So they might have to get rid of a couple of those blocks, which then affects, and it's a matter for them, but it's all about the applicability of local laws, state laws and federal laws. We as Friends of Buddina want all of those to be applied to each development application. And if council won't do it under the code, we will look at other ways of trying to have that happen, namely lobbying state government and so forth. One other thing about the building, which I don't think has been, much attention has been drawn to it, we don't have a copy of the building, do we? On Pacific Boulevard, for example, the building is not supposed to be longer than it is high. So 21 metres is the height, so the length of the building shouldn't be longer than that. Well, you might recall when Renee put her slide up there, fronting Pacific Boulevard was a total building, much longer than 21 metres. And we think that is significant. Also, the setback on Pacific Boulevard should be 6 metres. It's actually 5.5 metres. And the setbacks on, I'm not sure which street, I think Iluka Avenue, is supposed to be 6 metres, and it's much closer than that. We think these things add up to some significance, and to the application as it stands not being approved, even under code accessible. We will be putting on our Facebook page a Queensland State Parliament petition by someone in Brisbane to change the planning scheme so that we get rid of this code accessible, no consultation, especially. In addition to that, we have, some of our members have been working very hard. We have prepared our own petition to the Sunshine Coast Council to change this system we currently have, which does not make sense, that the major impact buildings are not notified, not consulted, and are assessed by planning staff, not councillors, when they have such a significant impact. It should be the responsibility of our elected representatives to deal with these complex and important matters, and we will have a resolution or a show of hands to see whether you agree with that or not. That's the position of Friends of Buddina. The other issue is traffic and parking. So, as I mentioned when Rodney was speaking, my understanding is that Council really just ensures that the applicant provides enough car spaces and parking on site. Nobody, other than council, is taking into consideration the impact on local roads. And we think when you have a Buddina urban village, as extensive as it is, near a Kiwana shopping centre, it's like a choking point. When all of that gets developed, how do you get in and out to Point Cartwright and anywhere? Well, it affects most areas. So we have spoken to TTM Group. They are expert traffic and parking consultants from Brisbane. They were actually used by Kiwana Shopping Centre. In one of their reports in 2012, they mentioned that Point Cartwright Drive was at capacity or near capacity at that time. So it is going to be something we need to talk about now. We need to get active about now, but by engaging TTM, now it will cost money. They will do surveys locally, $3,500. They will, in addition, which I think is even more important, for a total of $10,000, including the surveys, they will tell us what the parking and traffic impact of full development of the Buddina urban village is likely to be. We would like to undertake that study and then have another meeting and have them present to you those results, because really that's what we want to know about. Okay, we deal with each application as it comes along, but what is the effect of having this Buddina urban village there? And what can we do to minimise the impact when development does occur? So we will be giving details, there it is there, of a bank account, or I think we have boxes if you want to put cash or whatever into that. Now that bank account has 4 signatories, and no monies can be withdrawn unless there's a resolution of Friends of Buddina and 3 signatories. So it will be money well spent. Because, again, this council have done some surveys. We need to know the facts. What is the position right now with proper surveys, technically done? And no one can argue with that. Okay. So we'd urge you to sign the petition. I think we've got down the back, have we? There should be 6 copies of petitions. This is the one to the Sunshine Coast Council. Change this system. Change this code accessible. The big one is to try and change that 21 metres back to 12. 21 metres is 7 stories. Okay, if you're going to have development there, make it 12. That will be a much lesser impact. And make sure there aren't any other similar zonings in the future. We also don't, whilst it's allowed, having a corner store on Pacific Boulevard just does not make any sense, and especially when it's so close to Kiwana Shopping Centre. Okay. So I'd like to get your opinion. Okay, we're a group, a small group that's recently formed, but we want to be able to go to council, state government and other authorities to say that we're not just speaking for ourselves, the opinion of a few, that we've had a meeting, you've all turned up and you agree. The proposal that I put is that this development at Talinga Street is too important to be left to town planning staff to approve or disapprove, to put on conditions on the development in the event of approval, and that it should be referred by the local councillor, John Connolly. We call on him to call it up so that it goes to a full meeting of council and all councillors decide the terms and conditions. Those in favour? Those against? Unanimous. Great. Thank you. The next one is, Friends of Buddina will be insistent on the Talinga Street development being a maximum of 40% site coverage, not 59% or anything over it. Those in favour? Against? Thank you. Unanimous. We also, although Rodney has agreed to this, that the Sunshine Coast Council deliver its traffic survey results to the TTN group and also details of any forward planning for roadworks in the area, so that TTN can give the most accurate opinion back to us as possible. Those in favour? Against? Unanimous. Thank you very much. Thank you for your patience. Thank you for coming. Keep in contact with us, Friends of Buddina, the Facebook page. We have registered for the Development Eye alerts. You can too. We need to work together as a community and communicate with each other. And so if you hear of any further developments in the wind, you see drilling, testing, that's a sign that an application is underway. Let us know, let each other know, so we can get the best result for all here. The one other comment is, the hedge, 70% almost, site coverage. We don't want a recurrence of that. We as residents can do better than that if we liaise with council. We need to watch for stage 2, the hedge, and be ready to be vocal and critical about that. It is only by you fighting for what you really value, the ambience of this area and where you live. Because if we don't do that, our local authorities, our state governments, our federal governments are not putting enough money into infrastructure, and we're in such a huge growth area. We're the ones who bear the brunt of that. Thank you.
Excuse me, may I ask a question, please?
Sorry.
May I ask a question? Yes. We spoke about light pollution, and we all understand it's very important. Do you have any data about noise pollution? Will we be able to hear the ocean, or the traffic will be so beautifully noisy? I know there are some data about residential decibel. So my question is, are you looking in this direction?
It's a very good point, and we will take it up. It's not one that we've considered yet. Yes, there's a young lady. This is probably the last question.
Because at school, I've had to move the cinemas, take up some of that oval, and then just over across from it, now they're building a 21-storey high building. And I don't get why they're taking up so much of our school just to do stuff for people to watch movies and people to live in and people to do business.
Thank you. One point that I haven't mentioned, but it has been mentioned by a number of teachers, is the fact that there will be high-rise buildings overlooking the school oval, and that is not something that teachers are really comfortable with. If we can limit the height, it'll be the best we can do. Sign the petitions, keep in touch, and thank you for coming.